Hey everybody, peace and love. We are back with episode 3 of Slaves to Sovereign podcast with your hosts Paige Elbay and King Elbay. And today we're going to be talking about contract law. And there's a couple of things that a lot of people have concerns about in terms of world events that's going on a domestic and international level. And so we want to address those concerns. And there's a lot of information that King has to give today on contract law, too. So before we can begin, King, is there anything that you want to say to the audience listening out there?
Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank for your support. Continue to listen, and we're going to bring just a whole lot of information, life-changing information, assortment of information that is going to better assist you with understanding this contracts, so you guys can start looking at some of the stuff that you're sending. Get into credit cards, mortgages, and all of that stuff. All of this stuff is applied, and once you understand this, it'll take you even all the way to the international realm. So let's go, Paige. I'm ready.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen. There's a couple of things I wanted to discuss. Um, First things first, let's head over to the sss.gov website. I wanted to talk about the return to the draft. There's a lot of um, Gen Z people out there that are like, oh no, the president is not sending me to the draft because currently the United States, um, there's a lot of indication that there may be a war going on and that we have to have some kind of draft because the military is not reaching its numbers. They just increased the budget. And so this is the selective service system. Return to the draft. It says there is no draft at present in the event of a national emergency which required a draft. The following sections provide information on a sequence of events, the different classifications which have been used in the past, postponements, deferments, and exemptions in the peacetime medical draft. So it says sequence of events. Overview of what would occur if the United States returned to a draft. Number one, draft authorization. Congress and the president. A national emergency exceeding the Department of Defense's capability to recruit and retain its total force strength requires Congress to amend the Military Selective Service Act to authorize the president to induct personnel into the armed forces. I believe that we are already there because, like I said earlier, the military is having a really hard time with their recruitment numbers of people wanting to join. Some of it could be mental illness. The Americans have a higher rate of mental illness. Some of it could be fitness requirements. Everybody knows about that with the diet and things like that in America. Also, just a lot of people are not attracted to joining the military in general. Then number two, activation of selective service. Selective service activates and orders all personnel to report for duty. Reserve force officers, along with selective military retirees, begin to open area offices to accept registering claims. Local district appeal and national board members are notified to report for refresher training. I'm not going to read all of this, but I am going to read number three. A publicly attended, nationally televised, and live streamed lottery is conducted. The lottery, a random drawing of birthdays and numbers, establishes the order in which individuals receive orders to report for induction. The first to receive induction orders are those whose 20th birthday falls during the year of the lottery. If required, additional lotteries are conducted for those 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 19, and finally 18.5 years old. So, King, my thing is this. I know that a lot of U.S. citizens are saying they are not entering a draft. There's a current protest. You see it all on TikTok, Instagram, and all over social media. And celebrities are also talking about it of them not willing to participate in a draft. As ministers, a part of the religious order, how can we be of service in terms of trying to build this institution where individuals who are interested in joining the religious institution do not have to be subject to a military draft because of how they are contracting.
Well, once you come into the order, now this is what people got to understand. The military, the religious order is still is it can be looked at as still a part of the United States. But this is what you have to look at. We're a peace mission society, a peace mission. So that goes against our ideology. It's a conflict of interest. It's a conflict of morality.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you put someone into battlefield that may have a conflict with that?
Mm-hmm.
That can kill morale. That can kill. You can get people killed through your hesitation and not understanding, not engaging with the situation properly, so that you can be able to survive that.
Right.
So depending on that, so based upon your application coming into the order, and by us not want to resort to that type of conduct, with your sincerity will show that this is something that you're not willing to do or compromise with. So no one can interfere with your right of contract or your morality. That's a God given right, a choice. Your choices are God given. So
Mm-hmm.
when you deal in contracts, you pick and choose what contracts you want to align with. What I want people to understand though, you have to understand this. You can't come into someone's house, eat up all their food, take advantage of all the benefits, and then say, I don't want to help you clean up the house. You understand? This is just business.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to understand all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to understand these components, because a lot of people are reaping these benefits and then want to say, no, I don't want to go fight after you then went to school, got educated, got you a big house, got a wife and kids off the back of this system that was created, you know, while they're fighting to protect and preserve the integrity of this infrastructure. There's people in the military right now that's already gave their life, you know, for this. So we have to look at everything and deal with everything in a fair eye and start understanding really what's going on. I think a lot of us, due to the fact that we are misinformed and we're not well rounded with world events and political events,
Mm-hmm.
international laws and contracts, that people are totally oblivious. So they don't understand. So they have these misconcepts and this miseducation, which is a driving force of their civil disobedience. And
Mm-hmm.
that can be consequential, if you're not understanding really what's going on. But the religious order is here to open up doors and to protect our members, because we're a peace mission society. Our job is to promote peace, not war. To
Mm-hmm.
invite another form of diplomacy through um, through conversation. Sometimes war is a necessary evil, but the greatest weapon is the mind. To defeat one opponent by using the mind is the ultimate um, 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 determination of wisdom. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to learn how, to deal with people in a more diplomatic approach versus the other way around than with the physical approach.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that answer, King. That's wonderful. That's powerful stuff. Just to emphasize that the religious order is a peaceful, um, society. It's not meant for us to go into war. It's not meant for us to do anything. We're religious ministers and we're doing missionary work. Okay. And so people have to understand the separation between church and state. So this is also something that people are also up in arms about, literally. Suspect in main shooting rampage is dead. Sources say there was a mass shooting that occurred. Um, they said here it says 18 people, including 13 others, have been injured, but actually the death toll has risen to 22. And so, of course, you have the United States politicians like Kamala Harris had got up with the Australian flags as well as the United States flags, telling Americans we're going to be like Australia in a second, where, they're smart, they're leading the way. They took all the guns away from the people. And so, they want to strip the 14th Amendment citizens uh, or I want to say 14th Amendment citizens, but more so, yeah, 14th Amendment citizens of the right to carry a gun. You see what I'm saying? In this Constitution, it say, you have the right to bear arms, Second Amendment. So they want to take all of that away and say it's the guns are the problem. The guns are the problem. But somebody also had put up on Twitter that the most recent shootings that we had, I don't know if it was 10 or 12, but all of these shooters were mentally ill. And that guns are really not the problem. It's the people that are the problem. It's the society that's problem. It's the society that's sick. And we do not put a lot of emphasis on healthcare, mental health care. So what I want to ask you, King, is that I know that when joining the religious order, because we are a peaceful society and we don't engage in war, how would that how would carrying a gun uh how would carrying a gun contradict our mission? And will we be able to carry United States issued weapons with United States serial numbers and patent numbers?
Um, See, so I, I try to get people to understand the power of contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can create an institution through the religious order that can privately contract where you can have your own security, just like anything else, and they can have weapons. They have to go through all the security clearances and all of the different things, but it's outside of the religious order. It's an independent contractor that can protect you. I think I think it's necessary that you have protection. I'm not a fool, I'm not a fool to any of this. So,
Mm-hmm.
in my relationship to everything from our past leaders, a lot of our past leaders got assassinated.
Hold on, everybody. King has had some connection issues, but he'll be back. I want to share this in the meantime. Give me 1 second. Hold on. Okay, everybody. Sorry about that. King's back. Go ahead, King.
So, it would be foolish of me to believe that there won't be any pushback in the religious order. You know, several of our leaders in the past have brought attention to things and they were assassinated. So it would be foolish to believe that, some type of security measures should be in place, where you can't be disarmed, and it's purposeful, you know, to secure the leaders, because every country has it. They have a military, they have secret services. The president moved like that. Why? It's very critical. This is a part of politics. People got to understand this is a part of politics and relationships in politics. So when people choose not to put those implementations into their organization, they're at risk.
Mm-hmm.
They're at risk at being attacked. And And I don't want to put any of our members in that kind of um, terror. I want to be able to be prepared. I tell people being prepared is everything. My mother used to tell me you plan for war in a time of peace. So even though we're a peace mission group, don't get it twisted where we are there and not protect ourselves. You have a
Right.
right to. Everyone has a right to self defense. This is a natural right. Even the animals on the planet all have defense mechanisms. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? There's predators and there's prey, but even prey has defense mechanisms for what? For the purpose of their to be able for to increase their numbers and survival rate.
Hmm.
So the religious order is a very astute um, institution that understand contracts, that understand the necessary things and all the components to be able to build a community based on the necessary components for us to thrive and survive. You catch more bees with honey than you do vinegar. But we understand that even if you shake a bee's hive, they will protect their queen. So we have to understand there's a level of understanding that we need to always put certain security measures in place.
Hmm. All right. Thank you for that, King. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen and go over this um, other presentation in regards to the state of Israel. 1 second, I'm going to go ahead and share screen, family on the other end. This was a post that I saw here. All right. Okay. And you see it on the screen, King?
It's loading.
What about now?
I mean, key data. I can read it.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. State of Israel. Um, Located at 2 Palace Green, London, United Kingdom. Key data. The State of Israel is an active company incorporated on the 23rd of February 2023 with the registered office located in London, Greater London. The State of Israel has been running for 8 months. There are currently 0 active directors according to the latest confirmation statement submitted on the 22nd of February 2024. I think that's supposed to say 2023 though. And then I'm going to read the comments. This is from Raspy Rawls on Instagram. He posts a lot of informative information. So he said, there's a difference between a company and a corporation. Israel registered themselves as a corporate entity in 1947. You cannot register a corporation twice under the same name in 2023 after 70 plus years and it be accepted, which means that on October 31st, which is Halloween, that's Tuesday coming up, Israel as a corporation will expire. Once a corporation is formed, it is a legal entity that exists separately from its owners. This means that it has its own name, tax ID number, and legal rights and obligations as a corporate structure. Israel is bankrupt. When you are in that status, you have 0 contract rights. Once it expires, you cannot re-register that corp. So ask yourself, if Mike Johnson is preparing a bill for Israel, which one would it be? Would it be because it stands today, uh, you will not be able, oh, they will not be registered as a corporation after October 31st. What are your thoughts on this, King?
Um, the first thing you got to look at is where it was registered. Question: light bulb should go off in your head. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
where's this company registered? It was registered in Israel. I mean, in
London.
This bill was registered in London.
Hmm.
So we got to look at that. That's a flag. That's a red flag that you should be identifying it with. Why is it registered in London? Who created this infrastructure? Who wrote the corporation?
Hmm.
Who wrote it? Who owns shares in this? Who has rights in this?
Hmm.
So it says a corporation has rights and obligations. So we got to understand what are the rights based on the, the, the corporation infrastructure, and what is this obligations? Who is it obligated to? Then those are questions that you should be able to, those are things that you should be able to identify with. So now you say, I need to find out what is his rights and what is his, who is obligated to, who is the shareholders, and what is his obligation to those. Do this play a part in what's going on? Let's look at all of these things. So now we can ask questions pertaining to this corporate infrastructure and the way it contracts.
Hmm.
Now you can get direct answers versus then we are guesstimating what's going on.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So that's very interesting because it also would tie into, or one may ask the question about the United States. I want to say the United States, but what goes on in the United States? Like, for instance, the state of Nebraska. Okay. Where is the state of Nebraska registered? Washington, D.C. Where is the state of Wyoming registered? Washington, D.C. Where is the state of Texas registered? Washington, D.C. And people think that the landmass is the same thing as the corporation, which is not true. And that confuses a lot of people in terms of, wait, what do you mean? There's a natural state, or I want to say natural state. There's a natural version of Texas, and it's like, yeah, there's a natural version of it. It's probably not called Texas or the state of Texas, but one thing I do know is that the state of Texas is registered in Washington D.C., right? So one would have to ask the questions on who are the stakeholders, what are the rights that they have, and what is your relationship to the state of Texas, Nebraska, and Wyoming.
So let me give a little input. This is why you need to understand contract law, because contract law deals in the relationship with persons, places, and things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in order for a contract to elements that to have a contract, you got to have the persons that can be fiction or regular men and women. It can be corporations, companies, trusts, estates, whatever. These are the persons. They can be fiction or real men or women. Then you have the place. What is the place? It could be a territory. Could be a geographical location. It could be longitude and latitude. It could be whatever place that you describe, right? It don't necessarily even have to be a landmass.
Mm-hmm.
It could be on water. You see what I'm saying? Based upon what you agreed upon. And the
Mm-hmm.
rights are sorted based on these international agreements or whatever. So we got to look at, is the Ohio state the same as the state of Ohio? Is California state is the same as the state of California?
Mm-hmm.
These are things that you need to understand about contract law, and what you have to understand in relationship to, if you're talking about a national standpoint, nations have their own territories based on what they call it, based on how they're set it up. So you can have, like, for example, I remember going to the federal building, and it was some issues, and I was like, I need to call the police. They was like, the police, this is not in the state of Ohio. I said, what? What do you mean? No, this building is in the federal territory outside of the jurisdiction, even though it's in Ohio. I can see the building, but they say
Mm-hmm.
this building is not in Ohio.
Mm. Same thing like with, and that would be similar to like the embassies that are here on the land, right? Where you could walk into an embassy, Ecuador, for instance, and that is not the United States, although it may be in the state of Tennessee, on the landmass. It's not the United States. It's not Tennessee. It's Ecuador. It's an extension of Ecuador. And even we could go as far as to say that the license plates or the vehicles are also an extension of Ecuador. Would that be correct?
Of course. Like I said before, you're talking about contract law dealing with what? Persons, places, and things.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to have the persons, then you got to have the different places. That's the script. It's the place is the description, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the physical description. Then you have the thing. What is the thing? It can be all types of things: TVs, cars, clothes, whatever. These are things. But you got to have a location when we're talking about places. You got to have a, a location in which that is described in the contract. You understand? Versus like you could be a resident and a non-resident. What do that mean in contract law? So we got to look at this is why I talk about substantive rights with using substantive language, because the contract is going to determine the rights of both parties, identifying the persons and the place, the description of the place and the thing that is being utilized in the contract, and what parties have the rights to these things. So now they can determine if jurisdiction, for example, the embassy, let's say the embassy was to contract with the United States, Ecuador, the embassy. So would they describe, even though the embassy is here, as it appear on the landmass of this continent? Is it in the United States? No. They will have a physical location. They will have a geographical longitude and latitude, and they will say this is Ecuadorian,
Mm-hmm.
a part of the Ecuadorian state that's located to this. And those that will be explicitly expressed in the contract, so no one can confuse what's what.
Mm-hmm.
And the United States would do the same thing, and it was explained, and then it would determine who has jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
What court will have jurisdiction to hear this matter? What is the venue based upon the international treaties and the contract? What would be what um venue that you can hear this matter, this application of law? So you have to look at and understand contracts to understand your relationship with these persons, places, and things to make a determination, even where to go to argue these matters. The venue, right? Who
Mm-hmm.
got who has the right to hear this? So a lot of people don't even, when they're dealing in contract law, they don't even read their contracts. So they don't know who even has the right to entertain the contract that they sign. A lot of times people sign and send their case in a venue that they can't even hear it because it's not in accordance to the contract.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Speaking of which, right, I wanted to get your opinion because a lot of people may have lost some hope, because they're seeing a genocide play out, several genocides play out in many different countries and jurisdictions. One of the ones that's taking place right now that's getting more uh, airplay than others would be what's going on with Israel and Palestine. And so many world leaders have actively called what's going on in Israel, I mean, in Palestine, a genocide. The president of Brazil has said it's a genocide. Many countries are, um, the UN have had Security Council meetings calling for a ceasefire. I remember that the United States was the only one that voted no against it because they have the power to veto. And so I saw the meeting how a lot of the representatives had turned their back on the United States speaking in the meeting. And a lot of people are just feeling a little hopeless because they're like, what the hell is the purpose of the UN? How can they allow this to go on? Is somebody going to step in and do something? Even a high-ranking member in the United Nations had called Israel out and said, the Hamas did not attack out of nowhere. It didn't come out of a vacuum. And he acknowledged that the Palestinians were facing oppression for a long time. So then Israel responded and said, "Okay, we're not issuing any visas to the UN." Now the UN, Israel is a member of the UN, right? And so if there is an act of genocide and the UN cannot step in because it just is a congregation full of nations, who would be the one to hold them accountable? And can Israel do things like refuse visas if the United Nations decides to hold them accountable for anything or speak out against them?
What you have to understand is any country at any time can dissolve their relationship with the UN. Okay. We got to understand what the UN is. It's just an organization. It's nothing but an international organization made of nation states that chose to contract together. At any point, they can dissolve that relationship to say, we want to just not deal with none of that. And what they're doing to their people, um, then it will be up to the other nations to decide that we want to sanction them or step in based on those grounds. That's why they have treaties in place for people running for religious prosecution and all of these different things to go to these other states and renounce their allegiance and their nationality to take on another nationality due to the abuse of a state in which became abusive to his own people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there there's a number or plethora of choices that can be made. That other countries can make form alliances with Palestine. There's a lot of things that can go on. So, but we first got to look at how this began, how this relationship between the Palestinians and the new state of Israel, based upon its contractual relations. I think a lot of us are saying a lot of things, and what you will see in the media a lot of times is projected outcry, but they're not showing you the contracts. They're not going back to say, hey, this is what's going on. Because what I learned, what a lot of countries would do, they will contract, and they'll give you money and they'll do all of this stuff to preserve rights and land. And once you default on that, they might have your land for 100 years, 200 years, based on the contract, based upon what's prescribed in the contract. So now you are upset because Israel has taken a plot of land through contract that may have a institution has defaulted on a loan, and there might have been retaliation due to defending themselves because everyone's entitled to self defense. That's a God given right, and they can be retaliating. That's why I say I understand. I understand things at a deeper core of understanding contract law. Why do I need to understand? Because a lot of us sign contracts. We go to the hospital. You don't know that you can give up your DNA, gave up all types of rights to receive a minuscule benefit. And we have to start looking at things to say these things have to stop because this is taking unfair advantage. These could be illegal contracts that no one is talking about. These international contracts could be illegal, which they may can sue for injury based on a tort action of international tort due to whatever, what they might call predatory lending or practices to
Mm-hmm.
take advantage of a disadvantaged state. You see what I'm saying? So these are things on the international law we got to look at. We got to understand these things. This is why I talk about building a watchdog to do what? Watch, collect data, bring us back data from the international community so that we can start examining these contracts. So we'll know, hey, don't go to that country. They just signed a contract to do this and this. Your ass over there, you might get this, and this. They at war. They might be going to war with this. These are things that we have to know. The public is walking around just blind like sheep, not
Mm-hmm.
involved in nothing. Not these representatives don't represent you in your interests. They represent the bankers. They report to them. They're not reporting to you. You get a misconstrued idea of a false perception of what's going on. So now you're acting out of a belief or misunderstanding because you've been provided misinformation, fake news.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? And we have to stop. It's our civic duty, our international duty to start looking at international policies. Not just even if you got a government, you should have a committee that deals with government, that deals with international government to understand this community need to be involved. And we need to have insight on this information so that we can stop making these careless mistakes so that we can secure our future.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that response, King. I totally resonate with that. A question that I did have going back to what we was talking about with the UN though too. A contract would be like the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, right? There is a such thing as international law, and one of those international laws, uh, or many of those international laws, safeguard the rights of people, right? The God given rights, you know. And so my thing is, the question that I have is that um, I know that at the time when there was a genocide that happened in Germany with Nazi Germany against the Jews and whatnot, they had the Nuremberg trials. And so I am curious to know, would that be like something such as like the International Court of Justice that brings that? If there is a situation where the UN has to step in, or not the UN, but you know, the international community has to step in and have a trial or whatever the case may be. I'm just like, who would be the one to safeguard the rights in the event of a genocide? Because if Israel decides to say, hey, you know, we stepping away from the UN and we're gonna do what we want to do and just clean everybody out, you know, and do what we want to do, who would be the one to hold them accountable for war crimes if there are laws in place to protect people from things such as genocide?
So let's go back. Let's back it up. So
Okay.
let's look at Palestinian. Palestine might have to petition the UN for a policy, right? And over that policy, they'll push it into legislation in the UN in case of an event. Like if we this and this. So now the UN can enforce rights of Palestinians based on genocide and stuff like that. And they have the right to pass it on for those who violate the rights of Palestinians.
Mhm.
Now it's a legislative issue. So some of these policies have to be in place, and other nations now will have to take heed. If we do this, and now they got allied forces. Now other allied forces might come in contractually to say we will create a system, right, um, to enforce such rights. Just like you got the legislative, right? That would be the UN. Then you might create an enforcement, like NATO is an enforcement agency. They will come in, you will create something of that mass under contract that now has the power to enforce, to gather up these people, and then it might still be the International Court of Justice that are under application of contract that can hear such subject matter and prosecute those. So this is a matter of understanding contract law to bring in legislation through treaty and international agreements for enforcement. This is why it's so important to understand these principles so now we can take these factors and raise our level of understanding so we can stop being naive to all forms of policies, if it's domestic, if it's local, or even international, so that we can now be able to deal in things with a more precise understanding so that we know our obligations and our duties and what we have to abide by so that if we are breached or encroached, we'll know what our rights are. You see what I'm saying? Based upon the religious order setting up these committees, setting up Moroccan states so that we can be recognized by the UN and have all of our things, our charters in place, all of the different things. So we're going to be a grassroots entity that blossom into a more sophisticated institution with all those components in place. But that just takes time, persistence, and the right gathering of people so that we can institute all the things necessary to ensure our ability to thrive and cope with these change of events, because these are coping mechanisms. This is what they
Mhm.
call co-ops. We have to understand all of this stuff through contracts. You understand? We need a people cooperative agreement that this is what we choose to do as a people, and this is how we're going to co-opt and work with certain things under contract so that now we can formulate legislation that also safeguard us.
Beautiful. Awesome. So I want to say that may be it for my questions. Is there anything else you would like to add, King, about contract law? We can get into that.
Okay, so what we need to understand the elements and what is a contract and what makes a contract binding, the difference between an agreement and a contract. Agreement is not necessarily a contract, but it still can be binding. And there's different elements of agreement and a contract. So a contract, I told you, had to have the three things: have persons, places, and things. An agreement is just that we agree not to do something or we agree to do something. It's not necessarily based on person, places, and things. It's just say, hey, when I see you, you see me, We agree not to do this. That's it. It doesn't mean that you got to have a physical location, time of arrival, all of these different things that makes a contract. An agreement is a little different, but it's still binding. Um, what we need to also understand is substantive language. Trigger language was what I want to call. You have to understand language substantively written in contract. This is substantive means to create and define rights. So if we're defining and creating everything through the contract, that is substantively in the contract. And that's a permanent fixture in the contract that we got to understand. Now, the procedure is how everything is going to be decided and how we can go about getting remedy, right? But the contract itself is the substantive language in which you're going to enforce. And then you're going to go about the proper procedure. These are things that you need to know to understand how to deal with contracts and understand the substantive components in the contract to ensure a right. And if something is vague or unclear and nobody can construe what it is, and if the two parties don't know, then there was never a meeting of the mind on that clause or provision of the contract. So it becomes severable. It doesn't have any standing. It has no force. So if someone has a provision that they didn't disclose to you and you didn't know, that is an unenforceable part of the contract in which they have no right to enforce. So we have to look at everything in our relationship, and even how you sign a contract determines a whole lot of things in relationship to the contract. So we need to understand these components like minimum performance, implied agreements or contracts based on the substantive rights dealing with an injury based on you are intermeddler in a third part as a third party in a private relationship with two persons, whatever their concept of personhood is. We have to understand these things to these degrees so that we can be able to understand what our role and how to behave in our society so that we can ensure that we don't encroach other people's rights. And once you understand this, it'll give you the more ability to look at a contract and discern if you want to sign a contract because it's unfavorable. It has too many terms and conditions. A lot of us sign contracts thinking that we're going to get a great benefit. Due to our ignorance, we sign it. Or we sign contracts in desperation because we might need a car to get back and forth to work. So we sign it. And now we under these scrutinized conditions that's unfavorable. So we have to understand the importance of contracts so that we can start building an estate and understand estate planning through contracts and learning how to put these things in proper perspective to ensure that we have growth and development. I can't hear you.
Sorry, you all. Hold on, I have muted. Sorry, you all had muted my mic. But yeah, that's King's take on contracts, and I think it's very important that we start reading exactly what we're into and understanding our relationship. Even just going back to what we were saying earlier about what is your contracts with the state of, right? We just went over the state of Israel. We just saw that it's registered in London, right? And imagine all the contracts that people have with the state of Israel or the prior state of. Same thing with the state of, like I said, New Mexico or the state of Georgia. What are your contracts like? And how can you get out of those contracts, right? How can you terminate those contracts? Those are very important. And I feel as though, if you are interested in becoming a part of the religious order, a lot of those contracts have to be terminated in order for you to have religious rights and have those religious rights safeguarded. It is a change in the lifestyle that may be desired. However, people have to know exactly what they're getting themselves into. And, that's our job, is trying to provide that transparency here on this podcast. So, any final thoughts, King?
I just want to thank everyone for listening. Um, my final thought is, I think we can change our direction by understanding these things, and it's very critical for us to change these things because these things are not being taught in school. So, just to let everyone know, this is what we're going to be doing. This is the information you're going to be receiving. This is what, when you work with me and Paige in the organization, you're going to come into a new form of thought. We're going to raise your consciousness to a level um, that's going to give you all the necessary tools to be able to make sound decisions, being able to eyeball contracts and be able to say, wait a minute, I spot this in a contract, and be able to move different to secure your rights and interests in everything that you're trying to do so that your family can have a legacy, because that's what it's all about. To leave a place or world for our children that's better than it was previous, not to tear it down and leave it in horrible conditions and then giving them to the obligation of fixing what we tore down. Our job is for the every generation, we supposed to leave a better place, or at least leave it the same as it was, not tore down. This is when you come into our community, this is what we're doing. You're going to be able to make these things based upon what we teach, what we honor, and how we live. So that now you can say, okay, my family, if it was dysfunctional, I'm going to break that curse, understand the contracts, understanding how to build this community, finding your purpose in the community, and building a better environment for yourself and everyone that you come in contact with.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. I want to thank you all so much for listening. If you all have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat section in YouTube so that we are able to, answer that on the live. If you have any questions, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the podcast and to our YouTube. We have our podcast available on Spotify, and there's also a question and answer section there on Spotify, and we'll be able to get it there too. So please tune in with us. We want these to be more frequent. We try to go live every Tuesday and Thursday, trying to keep up with world events, and also, have questions for you in real time. You have questions answered for you in real time. And so that we can get the ball rolling on the religious institution and the organization to have something here in place to safeguard our rights and have this watchdog that's necessary, because we see what's going on. I know y'all see what's going on. We see what's going on. And so we're just here to provide the solution.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. This is your guy, King L. Bay. Peace and love. And we got more to come.
All right. Peace and love, everyone.